A lot of concern around the country about what the Postmaster General is doing. Is Trump concerned about it? Is he even aware of it? Let's see.
Joy have your backing for the actions that he's taken in the last several weeks?
Yeah, he's a fantastic man. He wants to make the post office great again. You ever hear the expression? He wants to make the post office great again. The post office is a catastrophe.
Mail sorting machines nationwide, that's one of the things.
I don't know what he's doing. I can only tell you he's a very smart man. He'll be a great Postmaster General. And he needs, obviously, if you're going to do these millions of ballots out of nowhere, he's going to obviously need funding. But the Democrats aren't willing to provide other things, and therefore they're not going to get the funding for that. But you are going to have a catastrophic situation with universal mail-in votes. And on top of it, the Democrats aren't willing to give the people the money and the post office the money.
Okay, so that was maddening, and also, like, what do you mean? They don't want to give money to the people in the post office. They've literally been fighting for that postal funding from the beginning. You and your guys said you would veto the CARES Act if it included a bailout of the post office. And they want the one-time payment again and the enhanced unemployment benefits, not even as much as I would want, but it's definitely there. And he lays out, he says that DeJoy wants to be able to take care of the mail-in ballots. I disagree about that. But he says, and to do that, they're going to need the money. But they're not going to get the money because I'm not going to give them the money, and it's going to be a disaster because they're not going to have the money. He lays out the entire timeline, the entire plan, and that is seen as what interpretation is there? That it's just a hard bargaining position for how much he wants to give money to people, that he can say, I'm creating a situation that will result in a disaster that I think is bad, but I'm not going to change. Mm-hmm. And that's the stated, that's not like us trying to read the tea leaves or read between the lines. That is what he said. You know, what cleaned up for English. That is what he said in that video.
Oh my God, look at the Democrats' mess I made.
Exactly. He said that it's his choice.
I mean, really, it's a masterclass in gaslighting. When all this is over and Trump has a post-presidential career, it will be like Gaslighting 101 with Donald Trump. And it'll be, online classes.
4 more years of gaslighting. Yeah, and God, he's like he has his total support to Joy, just total support. So, okay, now we talked about the fact that it would be disaster. Let's go to a little bit more of the video about where he lays out again what he thinks the disaster is going to end up looking like.
We are going to have an election that takes place on a beautiful day, November 3rd. And usually at the end of the evening, they say, Donald Trump has won the election. Donald Trump is your new president. Whatever they say, you know what? You're not going to know this, possibly, if you really did it right, for months or for years. Because these ballots are all going to be lost. They're going to be gone. And just take a look at a smaller basis. But it's great tests. We're doing tests. I mean, these are, you could call them polls. You could call them tests. Look at what's happening all over the country where you have universal mail-in. Wait a minute. The ballots are lost. There's fraud. There's theft. It's happening all over the place. Now, we're going to do it with this whole vast, big section of the country. It's crazy.
Okay, so to the video, he says ballots are going to be lost. And the thing is, like, he is going to say that 100 times between now and the election. It's not verifiable that some have been lost. You could claim that 10 have been lost, 100,000 have been lost, 1 billion have been lost. You could say whatever you want, and he will. So just get ready for that. But that also, if you were to count it correctly, it would take months or years, which is obviously nonsense. We know that. But that he keeps repeating it to set out there for his audience to expect that if it doesn't take months or years, it must then not have been done properly. If it only takes a day or two, then clearly they're missing something. Perhaps all those ballots that have been lost. You see how all of these little elements fit together to mean not that anything will go wrong, but that it will be easy to make the case that something invisible has gone wrong, possibly large enough to swing the election.
Yep. It is brilliant. It is a pretty good strategy, and it's scary because you hear him speak and you're like, this guy is not smart enough to be an authoritarian. And then this strategy, you're like, ooh, this one actually is pretty good because he wins either way. If there's foul play, it works in his favor and he wins. And if there is not foul play, then he can always claim there is foul play. But this is, again, it's like, oh, voter fraud doesn't exist. People voting 3 times doesn't exist. That's not real. Your 2016, warning didn't hold up.
Mm-hmm.
We all know that voter fraud isn't an actual thing. Voter suppression is a real thing. Yeah, just cheat. Just actually interfere with the mail. I think the best part of that clip was when he says, we might not know the answer for months or years. And you could hear the silence in that press room, just like took the wind out of it, the fear. And I think we're all feeling that fear. And I just want to say, once again, it's on us. It is on us to not only do our part to be able to vote, to help others vote, to actually work polls, but if something goes down, to protest, to take the streets. This is part of our democracy. This is part of our freedom. This is our First Amendment right. Don't you forget it. Like, if we don't exercise it, someone will take it away from us, and they already are. Look at the Black Lives Matter protesters, right? Yeah. But they have had, and everyone around this country have had that fearlessness. We need that same fearlessness in November and on up through it. So, look, this is not the authoritarian. There will be no authoritarian. This is a practice run. This is not it.
Mm-hmm.
F this guy, F his entire administration, take the streets.
Yeah, well, look, I'm right there with you, and when you head out to the streets, let me know, and I'll come with you. Is masks, distance. Let's be careful. But yeah, and when you say that, that there's silence in the room, think about it. Like, many of the people in that room are probably worried, as a lot of Americans are, that hypothetically, this guy, if we don't do all of what you just laid out, could represent the end of even whatever last vestiges of representative democracy we had, that effectively elections will become, it'll be like a rock in the 90s sort of situation or whatever. Because if he is successful in delegitimizing the election and making it virtually impossible for people to vote, then that's a significant concern. And then they're going through day after day of make the post office great again. Have you heard of it? Like, the idea that no, this is kind of what strongmen tend to be like, this weird, pathetic, jokey, hacky sort of thing. And so to have to sit through that and try to do a version of your job as if we were in normal times, that's got to wear on you. Really fast, I want to show one more video. So you talked about how voter fraud isn't really a thing. Voter suppression is. Here is their jujitsu for that sort of claim. Here is Mark Meadows being asked a question by Jake Tapper.
Registration. Anytime you move, you'll change your driver's license, but you don't call up and say, hey,
no
by the way,
of widespread voter fraud, though. But there's no evidence of widespread voter fraud.
There's no evidence that there's not either. That's the definition of fraud, Jake.
No, you're the definition of a fraud. What are you talking about? There's no evidence that it is. Like, if I were to be like, there's no evidence that lizard men are kidnapping 1 million Americans a day. Yeah, well, there's no evidence that they're not doing that. No, there is evidence that it's not doing that. That first of all, that'd be a BS argument anyway. But there have been many exhaustive studies about how much voter fraud actually takes place and who does it. Jake Tapper even brings up an example in that of a Republican in North Carolina engaging in limited voter fraud. But it is not some pervasive thing that's swinging millions of votes or changing the outcome of elections. But this is how, what Mark Meadows just said there, there's not going to be millions of Republicans who see that and think, well, that seems like kind of a weak response. They're going to love it. They're going to think that that is incredibly satisfying. Yeah, you're right. There is no evidence that it isn't happening, a thing that isn't a thing.
Shout out to Donald Rumsfeld, former defense secretary under W during the Iraq War, proving that they're trying to make the case that there were WMDs in Iraq. The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence.
Yeah. That's not how any of it works.
The most 1984 chilling Big Brother statement ever. We've heard it before. Wow, it's somehow always Republicans who love that line.
It is.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.